Welcome to this explainer. Today we're tackling something that trips up almost everyone studying for the CISSP exam or working in cybersecurity, the constant confusion between due diligence and due care. If you've ever found yourself staring at a scenario completely torn between the two, believe me, you are not alone. It's a notoriously tricky area, but by the end of our time together today, you're going to have a rock-solid understanding of both. Let's get right into it.
Here's a quick roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the core frameworks, jump into some real-world IT and OT examples, and finish up with why this is absolutely critical for legal defensibility.
So, what's the actual difference between care and diligence? Seriously, are they just synonyms? Do they happen at the exact same time? Well, no. The reality is that they are highly complementary, but they are entirely distinct practices. You really can't have a secure organization without both, and if you mix them up, you might just end up with the illusion of security instead of actual protection.
Think about buying a car, right? Before you buy, you're looking up safety reports, checking out crash tests, figuring out the interest rates. You were gathering information to make a smart, informed decision. That right there, that's due diligence. But once you actually own the car, you've got to maintain it, changing the oil, rotating those tires, filling it up with gas. Putting things into action like that, that's due care.
Okay, moving into our first main section, the two perspectives on these core frameworks.
Now, depending on the study materials or the compliance frameworks you're using, you're going to see these concepts taught in two slightly different ways. Under perspective one, it's all about investigating versus acting. Due diligence is basically your detective phase. You're figuring out what your risks and obligations are before you make a move. Due care is the corrective or operational phase, actually executing those security measures. To put it super simply, diligence is knowing your risk, and care is doing what's right to handle it.
But then we have perspective two. Some of the official review notes flip this timeline around just a bit. In this view, due care is that initial action you take to set up a baseline of security, like, say, initially writing a policy or installing a firewall. Due diligence, in this context, is the ongoing, continuous action to verify, evaluate, and audit those controls to make sure they're actually working over time. Think of it like constantly updating your antivirus signatures or running audits.
So, why the two views? Well, if we put them side by side, it's pretty clear why the security literature can sometimes feel a bit contradictory. But it's really not. It's just looking at the risk life cycle from two different angles. Perspective one is about the leap from planning to doing. Perspective two focuses on moving from initial setup to continuous, ongoing validation. Both are totally valid, and honestly, you absolutely need both.
Let's move into our next section and look at some IT enterprise examples to really apply these lenses.
All right, let's bring this into the corporate world. Say your enterprise wants to roll out a new third-party cloud database. Under perspective one, if your team is reading the vendor's SOC 2 compliance reports, analyzing their risk profile, and baking security requirements into the contract before signing, that's due diligence. You're doing the detective work. But once that database is approved, actually turning on multi-factor authentication and forcing standard access reviews and setting up end-to-end encryption, that's due care. You are actively doing the work.
Now let's flip to perspective two. Imagine your network team is deploying a new fleet of enterprise workstations. The very first thing they do is install an endpoint detection and response system, or EDR. Setting up that initial baseline defense, that's an act of due care. You are putting the basic required armor onto your assets.
But you can't just set it and forget it, right? Due diligence is what comes next. It's your security team running quarterly penetration tests on those back-end servers. It's monitoring those EDR baselines and continuously applying software patches and threat signatures. You are actively verifying that the due care you initially established is actually holding up against modern threats.
Next section, let's step out of the data center and look at some operational technology, or OT, examples.
In an OT environment, like a manufacturing plant or a water system, a breach isn't just about lost data. It's a very real threat to physical human safety. So if an industrial company acquires a new water plant, due diligence is all that upfront intensive research. It's auditing the asset inventory and running a business impact analysis to see exactly how a malware attack could mess with the human-machine interfaces. Once you know those risks, due care is the tangible fix. Throwing physical keycard locks on the control room doors, and air-gapping those critical programmable logic controllers from the main corporate network.
Now applying perspective two to that same OT environment. Establishing a baseline to survive something like ransomware means setting up automatic, offline, nightly backups of your logic configurations. That initial setup is due care.
But, how do you know those backups actually restore properly? That's where due diligence kicks in. It's running regular tabletop disaster recovery drills, testing the restore process, and continually doing background check reinvestigations on the control room operators. You're constantly verifying the safety.
Finally, our last section, legal and governance defensibility. Let's talk about why this matters in a courtroom.
All right, time for a bit of a reality check. Why do we care so much about perfectly defining these terms? Well, it all boils down to the prudent person rule. If your organization gets breached, the law judges leadership with a very simple question. Did they exercise the judgment and precautions that any reasonable professional would have taken under similar circumstances? The courts aren't expecting perfection, absolutely not, but they are absolutely expecting prudence. They want to see a baseline standard of expected behavior.
So, if the worst happens and a breach occurs, being able to prove that your organization practiced both due diligence and due care establishes what lawyers call an affirmative defense. You're essentially proving to auditors, regulators, and judges that you didn't just ignore the red flags. You have the receipts. You have documented evidence that you actively investigated the threats, and you have proof that you implemented reasonable, continuous mitigations to stop them.
This quote right here really hits the nail on the head. Showing that due care and due diligence were practiced can save the management from culpability and liability. That is the absolute bottom line, folks. Proving you did your homework and took action legally protects senior management from personal culpability, it minimizes massive organizational fines, and honestly, it just keeps the auditors happy. It proves leadership fulfilled their fiduciary duty to protect the organization's assets. Without both pieces, you are totally exposed.
At the end of the day, knowing the difference between these two concepts is the difference between faking security and having true, legally defensible protection. Due diligence is knowing your risk. Due care is doing what it takes to stop it. You absolutely need both to survive. So, as you look at your own organization's security posture today, I want to leave you with one final provocative question. Are you just knowing about your vulnerabilities, or are you actually doing what it takes to fix them? Thanks for watching this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.